are a lot of different ways to approach the piano, but I happen to prefer the note reading approach. And here's why. Different approaches to piano train different skills, but reading is one that gives you long-term access to the widest possible range of music. Some approaches tend to focus on patterns, chords and lead sheets, playing by ear, and these can get you some big sounds pretty quickly. They can be enjoyable and useful, but they really only train a specific skill set. And you're going to find that over time, you're probably going to be very limited in what you can play and even what you can learn. There are different approaches that get different outcomes. So, why I don't build around those approaches? It's not just how I approach the instrument. I don't teach from lead sheets. I don't build things around playing by ear because my focus is very specific. I'm interested in what allows you to sit down with written music and actually read it and play it. My focus is reading what's on the page. The ability to read music actually opens up a whole world for you. You aren't just limited to a handful of styles, a handful of just basically kind of the same type of music. It's fun for a while to do chording, but if you really want to dig in, if you really want to have access to all kinds of music, in my opinion, I think it's so much better to have the ability to read music. Access to music reading gives you access across all kinds of styles. Classical music, film music, arrangements, the ability to approach unfamiliar music. If you haven't heard it before, well, you can still read it. You don't need to have heard it. The ability to read something that was written hundreds of years ago. Just think about that for a minute. The ability to sit down and play something that someone like Mozart or Beethoven thought of hundreds of years before our time, and we can sit down and experience that still today. This gives you independence from having to memorize things or be stuck in a range of just familiar patterns. Reading gives you access to literally everything. Now, the problem with reading sometimes can be that people think, I just need to learn the notes better. And while notes are definitely one part of the issue, it's not the whole thing. Really, the problem is not knowing how to process music in real time. You're trying to identify you're trying to identify notes, really. You're trying to move your hands, you're trying to keep a steady rhythm. All at once, that can make for a lot of cognitive overload. It's not a note problem, it's a processing problem. And what happens a lot of times when people are learning to read music or learning to play the piano, they have some great teachers that teach them a lot of good things. And sometimes it's just a case of maybe your teacher is so good at what they do, they don't even remember how these reading skills came about. How are they able to sit down and do this? It turns out that there are actually a number of pretty much invisible skills behind the skill of reading music. And when you break these down and you start to see them, it's so much easier to learn. You learn how your eyes move across the page, you're looking ahead, you start to see not only notes, you do have to recognize individual notes, but you start to see them as groups in what we call chunking. Just like when you learn to read, you're reading not just individual letters, but you're putting them together in words, and as you become a progressively better reader, you're putting those groups of words together into phrases, and that's what allows you to move more quickly. As you read, the same thing happens at the piano. But these skills are rarely taught explicitly. In fact, a lot of people aren't even aware of them. So what happens when you don't have these skills a lot of times, or they haven't been developed to the degree that they should, reading starts to feel kind of slow and frustrating. It's kind of a clunky process. Students avoid it, or they kind of just stay basic. And that's where there's this tendency to want to fall back on patterns, familiar shapes, memorized material, and after a while that really starts to limit what you can play. You end up playing what you can recognize, but if you can only recognize a handful of things, your playing is never really able to grow beyond that. So what I would rather do, I would rather build the skill that removes that limitation and gives you the ability to sit down with a piece and actually make sense of it, even if it's a piece that's not familiar, even if it's more complex, because that's where the real freedom is at. When you learn how to read, it opens up the whole world. It really truly is like give someone a fish once, they eat once, but teach them to fish and they can feed themselves for the rest of their lives. They can go out and do literally anything they need to do. That's how I like to think about music reading. Not handing you pieces to get through, but giving you the ability to open up that music and work it out for yourself. Basically, it's going to make you independent when you have mastered these various skills. If you feel like you're having reading issues, if music is hard, I would be more than happy to meet with you and do a quick assessment. I'm going to drop a link down below where you can do exactly that. I also have a link down below to my free course, which is another great place for you to start. Now that you understand why reading matters, the next step is learning what actually makes it work. It comes down to a variety of skills. Check those out in some of my other videos.